Kids, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Exit Rich Beyond Money, no other than Mr. Noah Rosenfarb.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Noah, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I'm a third generation CPA that helps entrepreneurs pay less in tax. And one of my passions is helping entrepreneurs before they sell their company and structure their affairs in such a way that they either avoid the capital gains tax completely or potentially defer it or at least minimize it. And it's been a lot of fun and very rewarding because entrepreneurs are heroes. They create the jobs, and the more money they keep in their pocket, I think the better the world will be.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Noah, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. Looking for more and more empowering books like this to come. The title is powerful. What does it mean to exit rich beyond money?
I think it means something different to each of the entrepreneurs that we work with. But in general, I would say there's three themes in common. One is to achieve financial freedom, so where your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. The second is where you have your ideal life. So you look at your calendar and you're excited by what's on it. And the third area is really that you get an opportunity to live into your higher purpose and you're serving not just yourself or your family, but others and finding ways to contribute to the world in a positive way.
In a positive way. Who is this book written for? Entrepreneurs, business owners, or legacy planners?
No, this is predominantly geared for that business owner that's thinking about selling their company in the next 5 years, and they would like clarity around not just how to maximize the financial component of their transaction, but making sure that when the deal is done, their life is actually better. And unfortunately, the data is really horrible in this area. 75% of owners that sell their business express some level of regret.
What's the biggest misconception people have about exiting a business or career?
The biggest misconception is that the money is the most important factor. And most people are very focused on the financial outcome. How do I grow the value of my business? How do I sell the company for the best price and terms? And then, of course, how do I keep as much of that money as possible? Those are all very important. But when you look at the data, that has very little to do with how happy people are after a sale.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Noah. Why do you believe financial success alone is not enough when it comes to exceeding your life's work?
It's why isn't it enough? Is that the question?
Yes,
It's
yes.
because, money isn't everything, right? And I think we all hear that. And, for those of us that have had the good fortune of becoming wealthy, we get to see it firsthand. And there's a certain level of income where the marginal utility of those extra dollars doesn't really change anything. Yes, you could get that new car, or yes, you could get that boat, or yes, you could fly on private airplanes, and your quality of life might improve slightly, but quality of life doesn't always translate to happiness. And I think you see it most when you look at some images coming out of third world countries with kids with no shoes on their feet, but they've got big smiles and happy families. And it's clear that money doesn't buy happiness. It certainly does buy a lot of things. And my father always told me growing up, if money's not everything, it might be here and everything else is kind of down here. So everybody needs their health. They say, a healthy man has 1,000 dreams, but a sick man only has one. So we know that money isn't everything, but it's too often the greatest focus of the entrepreneur when they're thinking of exiting.
Yes, indeed, people. Money can buy books, but not knowledge. So let's talk about explaining or planning and strategy. What are the some common mistakes people make when preparing to exit their business?
Well, the first one, like I mentioned, is not being focused on how they're going to live their life post exit. And I would say, really, where that kind of rubber meets the road in that area is their personal identity. So most entrepreneurs are very tied to their business. A lot of times when you look at their network of people who they spend time with, they're spending time with what we might call deal friends, people that are customers, employees, vendors. And when they sell the business, those relationships essentially deteriorate or disappear. And what that entrepreneur is left with is a blank space on their calendar. And they go out and they try and meet people in the world. And people want to ask the first question in America is always, what do you do? And they don't have an answer that makes them feel good about their situation.
Mr. Noah, how early should someone start planning their exit strategy and why?
They say the best time to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. And I think the same is true when you're thinking about selling your business. It's always good to have a business that's prepared to be sold because businesses that are ready to sell are operating more effectively than businesses that aren't ready to sell. And so if you can put your business in a position where any given day, if you got a great offer, you could actually get through a due diligence process and close on that transaction, you have a healthy business. So the sooner the better. If you are the type of person that isn't doing a lot of planning in your life, you don't have a good financial plan, you don't have a good estate plan, you don't have a good business strategy, then you might want to just get focused the year before your transaction. Really, it takes for most businesses 6 months to 12 months from the start of a process to get to a closing. So you've got to be preparing in advance of that.
Yes, the time is now, people. If you are ready, Mr. Noah, what role does emotional readiness play in a successful exit?
Yeah, being ready to exit has emotionally, right? Putting aside financially, which has a lot of emotion tied to it. But if you want to exit your business, you've got to be clear about how your life's going to improve after the sale. And I would say you should look at four questions that should be easy to answer when it comes to how you'd spend your time. Who do you want to spend more time with? And who do you want to spend less time with? And what are the things you want to start doing? And what are the things you want to stop doing? And when you have clarity around those answers, then you want to map that out on a calendar and think about what your ideal week looks like. You can't just sit on the beach. Entrepreneurs are not the type to sip margaritas or play golf every single day and be satisfied with their life. That may feel great for 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year or two. But at some point, our nature as entrepreneurs is to create value for others. And so we've got to find ways to be prepared so that we are just as excited to let go of the rope we're swinging on as we're about grabbing onto the new rope that's going to bring us into the next chapter of our life.
How can someone align their exit strategy with their long term personal values?
So this really comes into play in talking about how are you going to treat your employees and leave them? How do you want to leave your customers? And how do you want to leave your vendors? So often the biggest focus is on the employees. The relationship capital that the owners built with their employees is the most important and front and center. And so you want to be sure that when you're interviewing the potential buyers or even developing your acquirer list, that you're thinking through how might these people treat the people I care about in my business. If you're going to sell to a strategic acquirer, someone who's already in your business, they're more likely to cut your CFO, to cut your head of HR, to cut your accounting team. And they're going to basically strip out the personnel and even your supply chain and potentially even your lower end customers because they want to integrate your business into their infrastructure. And that might be emotionally unsettling to you. In contrast, if you do something like an ESOP, I had a call today with a client that had an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, in their business. When they sold their company, all of their employees, and of course, including the founders, all benefited from having a certain amount of the company stock in a retirement plan for their benefit. And so there's the whole spectrum of basically being in a position where you want to sell your business to your management team or through an ESOP where everything's essentially going to stay the same. And potentially, as the seller, you're taking the risk of whether or not they succeed or fail because you're probably financing a substantial component of that transaction. Or the flip side, you want to get out of there as fast as you can. You want to sell to a strategic acquirer who could absorb everything and pay you the highest price at the closing table. So, it really will depend on what you value more, the capital, the relationships, the ongoing business. And I think it's important to take a look at it and really look at yourself in the mirror and say, what is most important to me?
Very well said, Mr. Noah. Beautifully articulated. Can you explain the difference between selling a business for a profit and cashing out with purpose?
So I think in both cases, you probably want to have a profit at the end of the day. I think when you cash out with purpose, what we're really looking at is what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And sometimes people talk about legacy or estate planning and thinking about what's going to happen when I die? What's going to happen with the assets that I've created during my lifetime when I'm gone? What's going to happen with the relationships I've created, when I'm gone? But really, what we want to help the entrepreneurs focus on when they're selling their company is what's that next act going to be? How are they going to contribute to their family, to their community, to the causes that they care about? And so that they build themselves a life where their legacy is being lived into in that next chapter. And it's not something that's, left for another day. It's something that they're focusing on before they sell their business. And that really is what I've learned through my own experience, through coaching dozens of entrepreneurs through the process of selling their company. The ones that invest the time in advance of a sale to have clarity, not just clarity through a plan, but clarity because they've tested what it is they want to do. And I'll share with you a brief example. I was speaking with someone that's 79 years old. They're thinking of selling their business. And what they want to do when they sell is go be a DJ at old age homes. They want to go and play music and watch people enjoy their music. And my question to them was, how often are you doing it now? They said, well, I'm not doing it now. Now I'm working. And so what I encourage you to consider is whatever that next chapter is, bring it into your current life. How do you go and do one DJ session, once a month and see if you like it? A lot of people say they want to invest and advise startup companies. Well, how many investments have you made already? And do you enjoy it? Get your testing of the thing you want to do next done while you still own your company. Because if you're wrong and your company is gone, you're going to go through a tough emotional period, which some might refer to as a depression. And unfortunately, when you look at divorce rates post exit, they tend to skyrocket both because there's liquidity. So it's an easier way for the dissatisfied spouse to leave the marriage because now there's some liquidity involved. And also, again, there comes this despair from no longer owning a company that impacts relationships, not just with your employees, your vendors, and your customers, but also with your family members, and most importantly, with your spouse.
Mr. Noah, speaking of legacy, so let's talk about legacy, purpose, and identity. What questions should people ask themselves to define their ideal life after exiting?
I think it goes back to those questions I shared before, and sometimes the best way to consider what your options might be when you're thinking about your future is to go buy a lottery ticket and then sit down and think, if I won this lottery, if I won 100 million, 200 million, 300 million dollars, what would be the life that I consider living? And then look at your answers and decide, do I really need that 100 million or 200 million, or am I going to be able to implement some of those ideas, some of those wants, some of those desires from my existing amount of income and capital? And what I found in my life is the more often I ask myself who I want to spend time with and what do I want to start doing, and who don't I want to spend my time with and what do I want to stop doing, I don't need more money. I need to take more proactive and courageous action to actually implement my own path to getting where I want to go. And I find that's true for so many entrepreneurs.
Mr. Noah, what's your advice for someone who's fears losing their identity after exiting a business or a career?
Yeah, I would say it goes back to doing something sooner. So before you give up that identity as an owner and you go to the next, whatever event where someone's going to ask you what you do and you're not going to be clear or confident in your answer, test. Start thinking about that future and bring it into the present. One of the best reasons to do things like that is because businesses that don't rely on their owner are more valuable. So if you can find a way to own your business without being directly tied to operating your business, or to be less connected to, 60-hour work weeks, 50 weeks a year, the freer you get yourself from your company, and the more removed you get from the business itself, the more space you create on your calendar to explore these other options. Not only do you get the benefit of seeing what your future life might look like, you also get to increase the value of your company, because the buyer that has confidence that the future is going to be the same whether or not you show up to work, they're going to pay more for that business.
They gonna pay more, people. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Noah. And what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
The short-term and long-term goals, what was that?
In writing.
In writing for me personally?
Yes. Yes.
Uh, so my personal goals, I'm focused right now on trying to find entrepreneurs that I can really change their life trajectory and potentially save them from that depression, save them from that divorce, save them from that challenge that they face after an exit, because it's a really unfortunate scenario that we find, especially American entrepreneurs in, where they sell their business and everyone around them thinks that's the pinnacle of success. And unfortunately, they often can't share the challenges they're going through because, when you cash a big check, nobody wants to hear your problems. They think everything's great. And my goal in the short run and in the long run is to change the conversation, to help entrepreneurs be more focused on what it is that they're going to do and how to make sure that they have a better life when they no longer own their business. And on a correlated basis, I help entrepreneurs pay less in taxes. And so my goal there is over the next decade to save $2.5 billion of tax, to keep it in the hands of the entrepreneur so that they could do with that capital what they see fit, rather than giving it to our government to spend in the ways that they want.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Noah. And good luck to your goals. Let's talk about living the life you design. How do you encourage people to dream bigger about life after the exit?
I think the that exercise with a lottery ticket is often helpful, because sometimes people's minds are constrained by the capital and the resources that they have. And so opening and expanding their mind into what's possible by theoretically having more capital can be helpful. The other way is to do it with time. So I like to map out an ideal week and also what I call like an ideal year. So in my life, my current ideal week when I'm home at my desk is I spend about 20 hours working, and the rest of my time playing. And I play with my wife on Wednesdays. I play with my I take the time to myself on Fridays. I shouldn't say I play with myself, but I might go meet a friend for lunch or go out for a long walk or handle whatever it is that I want to do personally. And then professionally, I spend Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays working, and the weekends are meant for my family. And then I spend about 12 weeks a year outside of the office, outside of my home, vacationing and enjoying travels. I've been to over 70 countries. So for me, what I found is creating the opportunity to build the calendar that I want, and then fitting in to each of those pieces, my leisure, my work, my recreation, my family, my education and learning, my socializing. And so I try and develop for the people I counsel a similar framework for them. Where do you want to be living? Some people have in their mind when they no longer operate their business, maybe they're spending their winters in a warm climate and then their summers where they live, which has a nicer summer climate, and they want to split their time. Okay, and who are you going to socialize with? And how many days do you want to have breakfast with your spouse or your children? And what about lunch? What about dinner? How many days a week are you exercising? And thinking through all the things that they want to accomplish and then scheduling that into an ideal week. Because what often happens to the entrepreneur without a plan is they just sit around and they don't have a confidence that they're spending their time wisely. And that's what leads them to this negative thought pattern of, now I'm worthless. Now I don't have any value. Now nobody cares about me. And so what we want to do is build all that infrastructure in advance and let them test it out as best they can before a sale. So that way, when that sale comes, that transition is smooth.
Mr. Noah, again, very well said. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Abstract Essay, in its fifth season, People, Abstract Poetry, and the third season, a Book 101 review for sure. It will my fifth season already, Comedy 101 in its second season, Food 101 in its fifth season, as well as my Book 101 review, Geography 101, which is I'm inviting you to be part of it, Mr. Noah, because I'm discussing all the places that I've been through in its third season, Love Letters in its third season too, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101 and Movie 101 review in its third season, and Music 101 in its third season too. So please do listen, available where you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Noah, what do you hope readers feel, learn, or do differently after reading Exit Rich Beyond Money?
I want them to take action, and I want them to actually put pen to paper. The book itself has questions at the end of each chapter for the entrepreneur to consider, to either write their notes right in that book or to kind of keep like a blog or a vlog or notes on their phone. But walk through these series of questions so that you can be better prepared, not only to get the best price, not only to find the right buyer, not only to know how you're going to treat the people in your life that you care about when you ultimately have this successful exit, but figure out your tax strategy, figure out what your ideal life looks like, and put yourself in a position that you can celebrate that closing, not just on the day the wire hits, but 1 year, 2 year, 10 years later, thinking through that you really created a great life for yourself.
Mr. Noah Rosenfarb, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And we are looking forward for more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So can you please invite our listeners to support Exit Rich Beyond Money and of all your books?
Sure. Yeah, love it. And if anyone has an interest in learning more, I'd welcome them to connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course, you could visit our website at talkabouttax.com.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Noah Rosenfarb because if you support him, more and more and more empowering business, more and more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Noah, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a great day.
Bodycon people, see you soon.